Hi, I'm Jan Streeton and I'm going to talk to you today about human resource systems, and I'd like to start off by explaining the current 3 different levels of human resource systems that are available and also some of the terminology that's in use. So HR systems have been around for a long time and there are several different terms that people will use. You will hear it called HR systems, HRIS, which is HR information systems, HRMS, which is HR management systems, and also HCM, which is human capital management. All of those terms are still current, they're still used, and it really depends which vendor that you may be talking to or whose vendor's products that you're looking at as to which term they're actually using. But in the main, they all do the same thing. There are currently 3 different levels of system that are available to HR practitioners. The first one is a very basic one, and it tends to be termed as just a HR or core HR system, which includes basic HR management information such as employee records, maybe time and attendance, and usually payroll as well. But they are quite basic, and those are based from several years ago when systems first became available. Quite basic functionality, but still very useful because it takes away the repetitive administration tasks and allows you to semi-automate that process. The next level up is now becoming a bit of a dated term, and that's HR suites or HR management suites. The term suites came about because HR started putting together, for example, core HR with health and safety and then maybe recruitment. So vendors started using the term suites of products to make it more attractive and also to reflect the level of complexity had moved from the basic core system up a level. Suites now, as I say, is getting a little dated because the HR technology has moved on so much. I will talk about trends shortly, but for now, probably the most comprehensive system that's still in general use. It's been around since 2009, 2010. It started really being the buzz term, which is ERP, which is Enterprise Resource Planning. And that really incorporates all the HR data with other business areas data. So that made it possible to start looking at recruitment, getting the right people, attracting them, retaining them, developing them. So obviously to develop, you're then starting to look at learning management systems, which traditionally in the old HR systems would have just been straightforward training administration. Learning management systems, or LMS, started to take trends in people's development, so matching their skills against the job requirements and being able to predict what training requirements would be coming up and what development opportunities, for example, for leadership. So those are the 3 existing levels. There are some very exciting trends coming up that started to appear in 2014, and I'll talk about those shortly. So you will have already seen the previous script that I presented on talent management systems. They are still in wide use. Organisations are using those. Some organisations actually are only just moving on to them. So some people will tell you, if you read some articles, for example, Bursin and Associates, they will say, oh, talent management is quite dated, but there are organisations that are only just moving on to it even now in 2015, and to them it's new and exciting, but that's just the level that their organisations are currently at. And of course all organisations move at different speeds because of different resources and cost considerations. So the talent management modules that I went through last time very briefly, just to remind you, were recruitment and talent acquisition. So getting the right people on board, making sure that things like your job postings, your talent management system can actually allow you to put up postings that can be displayed internally, externally, also on third-party job boards. So it's moved on quite a bit from the old traditional HR system. Performance management, which really, the performance management screens themselves in most vendors' products is just really a on-screen version of the old paper templates that we used across HR in different organisations. So if you looked at a performance management screen, it would just have sections of what the employee's objectives were, what their core competencies may be that they're aiming towards, what the leadership competencies are that they're measured against if they're in a leadership role. Then it would have core job competencies that were specific to their individual roles, and then maybe a manager's section that outlines other development or training needs they may need on top of that. So that's performance management. Where talent management took it to the next level is being able to take that information and seamlessly link into other applications such as the learning management that I've already mentioned, and something called job profiles. So job profiles and employee profiles. And what that actually does is the employee profile says, Brenda has these skills, these qualifications, this work experience, and to date has performed at this level within the organisation. Against that will be a job profile that says this person's current job requires these skills, requires this educational level, and requires this experience. And it will actually do gap analysis for you. So if Brenda, for example, scored a 3 on her performance appraisal, but the job requirement is for a 4, that will automatically generate a learning plan within the learning management system. Now, of course, I use the term automatically generate, but somebody in human resources has to do all that data mapping first. So there has to be really good HR policies and procedures in place. And one of the clients I'm working with currently, they have a dedicated classification consultant who will define on the job description exactly what level of performance or expertise a particular employee needs to meet. So that's done within HR. The manager obviously does the performance appraisal, but it's if they're in something like operations, you wouldn't expect them to have the applicable knowledge to define what level the jobs are at. Obviously there's consultation, as in everything, so you tend to find now HR are working much more closely with other areas in the organisation and other departments to get all this information into their talent management suite or talent management system so they can populate and do that type of gap analysis. What they then do with that information, I'll talk more about it when we look at HR metrics and analytics. Okay, the other aspect that I touched upon in my previous presentation was using the job profile and the employee profile, which I've just explained, but the real aspect of it is employee development. There are even modules available, for example, called e-development, because it's done online. The employee can see exactly where they are. And that has led actually to one of the trends that I'll talk about shortly of employees almost self-measuring and benchmarking themselves against either a job profile or against their colleagues. So in this section I'm going to talk more about the HR trends that are developing. Some, as I say, came up during 2014, some are really just starting to take off now, and some are just being talked about, and there aren't actually systems at the moment that can do it. But I'll give you a little overview of what's been happening in the market and where it's likely to go in the next year or so. So in 2014, the cloud, workforce analytics and mobile applications started to become leading trends in human resource systems. Trends for 2015 actually take that to the next level. So I think over the coming year, based on research that I've done recently, certainly during 2015 and 2016, we'll start to see a major shift towards what they call mobile first technology. So what's actually happening in the HR vendor market is they're developing systems now first and foremost for mobile platforms. Most of us have smartphones or tablets, and they're developing for that market first and then thinking about how they can transform that to appear on a website or on an organisation's intranet. Whereas up until recently, it's all been about the screen on a computer at a desk, and there's not been an awful lot of attention paid to the mobile market, and I think that's about to change in quite a significant way. There is actually a reason for that, and I'll touch on that shortly. As well as the mobile market, the other area that seems at long last to be improving is the better user interface. So vendors are starting to wake up and realise it's not about the core group of HR users in the HR department or in the payroll department and whether or not they've got a blue screen or a green screen, and thankfully we've moved from green screens years ago. But it's not about the colours that the HR department like, it's about the end user. With things being more mobile and being accessed on mobile technology, they have to think about usability aspects for employees and the ease of use. So for example, one of the applications that's I think a company is just about to launch, if they haven't done so already. Around about Christmas time, there was a big article on Forbes about a company that's worked really hard on using iPhones or equivalent, where just like you do in the coffee shop now, you can tap your iPhone on the payment reader. They're using that for time and labour, so people can come into work, hourly paid people, tap the iPhone on a little sensor, and it records their in time and out time, and obviously break times. So that's really starting to have an impact in the HR market. The other area of growth is social media and social recognition. So people have started using Facebook, LinkedIn so much more than even 2-3 years ago. You know, people kind of felt, oh, I might have to use it. And now even people of a certain age that have, like myself, that have kind of resisted it. It's like if you're not on social media, it's almost, who are you? And it's the same with organisations. Organisations now are starting to drive their employee engagement and employee attraction through Facebook, through LinkedIn. LinkedIn in particular is being used as one of the major recruitment tools. And consequently, HR system trends have started to really pick up on this, and the software that's being developed is much more socially orientated than the traditional systems. Now, obviously, you're never going to have your core HR data because of privacy concerns and confidentiality. You're not going to have your performance management information on a social media platform, but you may have something like Employee of the Month that's actually displayed on LinkedIn and Facebook and other social sites that's actually giving social recognition to employees in the workplace. And the thought behind that is it's twofold. One is the employee gets some gratification, but also it reflects quite well on the organisation as what a caring employer we are, and wouldn't we be great to come and work for. So the war for talent is still driving a lot of this. One of the other areas that's a big area of growth, and you'll see me wearing one of these, in general, people are getting much more used to self-measurement and self-monitoring. So people are out for a run, they want to see how well they compared to a colleague or a friend, and did they run 5 miles or did they do it in 10 minutes? And how do I compare against them? How many steps did I take today? How many likes have I got on Facebook? And that again is starting to be reflected in HR systems. So just like some people wear these or the Fitbits on their wrists, there is a move now towards employee badges with little chips in them that allows employees to monitor where their employees are and how many people are they mixing with on a daily basis. So who are the social movers and shakers within the organisation? And how does that impact their performance? It's actually seen in quite a positive light. So if you've got somebody that's quite gregarious and involved and has their finger on the pulse of the organisation and understands what's going on, then it may well be that they're a high performer because they know what is happening outside of the HR boundary, if you like, of the office. So they know what's going on in the organisation. And employees in general are getting much more comfortable with self-measurement. Obviously there are data security aspects and also data privacy. because at the moment, although people are comfortable with self-measurement, it's a term that's actually referred to as the quantitative employee. So if you've not come across that yet, I urge you to Google it and just have a look at the research that's coming out on that particular market. So we're getting used to comparing ourselves against other people, but obviously at some point I think there is going to be pushback from the employees in general as to how much of that social information they're comfortable with their employers having. It is almost like the Big Brother aspect, but it is in the main being used for good to ascertain who your employees are that are involved, and for sales forces in particular, how sociable are our salespeople. So that's actually helping to measure, and then what are the results of that salesperson? Are the more engaged salespeople getting higher sales values than the less social? So it's being used for research purposes rather than what is the employee up to purposes. So there we go. So that's some of the trends that are coming out. One of the main areas as well that's changed, it's quite exciting if you're a bit of a geek head. But if you like technology and you like the analytics side, one of the growth areas is actually in people metrics. Again, I'll talk more about that in the metrics section, but there's an increase in engineers, statisticians, mathematicians coming into the HR environment. And the reason for that is for the changes in analytics, but it looks like that's going to be a growth market and a growth trend over 2015, 2016. And I think that's something that's very exciting, that non-traditional HR people are starting to come and work within the HR department. So I think that will be good for departments in the main. Okay, I'd like to talk next about some of the popular software that's on the market at the moment, and why it's popular. And this is the current market, not the anticipated future market. So just to give you an indication, I'm going to quote a statistic that I picked up from Bursin. I do use them a lot for research. So talent management systems continue to be popular and are still growing in size. They grew by over 17% last year, that's 2014. And the market is around $5 billion in size. So you can see by that $5 billion, and it's anticipated that there's still another $17 billion in potential growth with new software. So it's a huge market. Some of the more common vendors include SAP or SAP, Oracle, Northgate Arinso, that's who I actually used to be a consultant for, Workday, Cornerstone, of course IBM, HR Smart, SumTotal, Ultimate Software, and ADP. Now ADP were traditionally more an outsourcing provider, so they had their own software that they developed around outsourcing, but even ADP now are getting more and more into the software development. The original aim of a lot of these vendors, particularly the Oracles, the SAP, and even IBM, was to create software that was for use predominantly within the HR department itself. And that was the original aim of talent management. Obviously, over the last 5 years or so, that aim has grown, and it's now moving towards HR data that is usable by the rest of the organisation. And for example, when employee self-service was first made available, I actually view that as one of the first steps that took them down that road, because it was for the first time that HR information or HR data was available outside of the direct control of the HR department. So I think that if you look back over the last 10, 15 years, that is probably the trend that started it all off.